Ah, Halloween, a time when kids running around and collect candy in all sorts of different costumes. I know it's September, but I decided to start the horror theme videos early because I want to make more, hopefully, this year than the last. Most importantly, I'm too old to dress like a monster and run around in the neighborhood trick-and-treating. If I start knocking on people's door, pretty sure the police will be involved. It will be ugly. So the next best thing is to play a horror video game. And to start this year's Halloween, I choose an indie game. The Count Lucanor. Pixel art adventure game inspired by classics like Zelda and Silent Hill. Okay, you got my attention with the Silent Hill part. I decided to change the format of my videos a bit. I'll start with the story for some context, then quickly move to gameplay, art, sound, etc. before spoiling the plot completely. So let's begin. Also, due to the nature of the game, you can consider everything a spoiler. I'll try to avoid spoiling too much, but it's almost impossible entirely. You play as 10-year-old Hans, who lives only with his mother in a house near the woods. His father went to war a long time ago. On his 10th birthday, he got mad at his mother because she doesn't have any presents or candy for him. The family is poor, so the mother doesn't have anything to offer to him. So Hans decides to leave the house. He's a grown man according to him, to become an explorer, to search fortune, become prince in a castle, and never coming back. Just before he leaves the house, his mom gives him a cane that belongs to his grandpa, 3 gold coins, and cheese. After leaving his home, Hans meets a bunch of characters which showed up again later in the game. You can interact with them, and depending on your actions, there are consequences later in the game. Soon after that, he ends up in some sort of twisted reality of his world. He sees a kobold and follows him to a castle. Then the nameless creature explains that this is the castle of Count Lucanor and he is looking for the heir of his fortune. Whoever passes quote-unquote the simple trial of guessing the kobold's name will be taken to the Count to claim his legacy. Of course, Hans is happy with his luck and dives deep into the castle. However, this is not an ordinary castle, it's full of traps and monsters. The story is pretty decent. Halfway through the game I realize it's a fairy tale. The characters and monsters you meet, the setting, time period, scream the influence of Brothers Grimm, Hans Christian Andersen and Don Juan Manuel, but darker. I know some of their stories are not cheerful as Disney later made them to be, happily ever after endings, but in some scenes the game beats them. To top everything, there are 5 endings from which you can decide for yourself how the fairy tale will end, Disney's or the original style. And you don't need to replay the whole game to see them all, just a small chunk at the end. I'll talk about them in more details later in the video and tell which is my favorite. So if you like dark fairy tales, you'll like the plot, but also you have to like the gameplay to enjoy it fully. However, there is a part of the story which could be done a bit better. I'm talking about Hans' character. He trusts everyone and in some of the endings he makes smart decisions. Throughout his whole journey, it's not shown that he grows. What I found really interesting is the inspirations for the game. After I finished the game, started to wonder in what time period the game is set. The answer was a couple of clicks away. My best bet is around the 18th or 19th century. The reason is the inspiration for the game. The first one is obvious, the name of the protagonist, Hans. I think it's a nod to Hans Christian Andersen, the author of Little Mermaid, Thumbelina, etc. The second is Brothers Grimm. I cite them because of the similarities of the themes, a child main character, grim or bittersweet ending, and so on. I'm not an expert with their stories, but from what I've known, I draw this conclusion. None of the stories are gory as this one, I think. Burning a witch can't come close. The biggest inspiration comes from Don Juan Manuel's Tales from Count Lucanor, or the original name translated from Spanish, Book of the Examples of Count Lucanor and Petronio, for obvious reasons. It was first written in the year 1335. I'm not familiar with his tales, but judging what inspired the dev, probably the stories are similar to the well-known fairy tales. The Count Lucanor is a 2D adventure game where you solve puzzles and hide from monsters. There is no combat. When you enter the castle, you see all around the place color-locked doors and you can't enter them at the moment. You roam around until you reach the center garden of the castle. There is standing one of the characters you meet before entering the castle, the merchant. He gives you the first of 4 keys you need, the blue one. Also, he is selling a golden key, an envelope with one of the blue kobold's name letters, and corn. All of those items you may need to progress. In each room you will face a challenge in the form of a puzzle. The solution is almost never in the room. It's usually in a different place in the castle, or maybe there are two puzzles inside, and for the second one you get the necessary item maybe an hour later. They are not very tough, but not extremely easy. The only challenging is guessing the name of the kobold. The good thing about the puzzles are some have more than one solution. Some even depend on your actions. This applies not only for the puzzles, but even for traversing the castle. You may miss a character or enter a room differently. Your action can lead to uncovering shortcuts or missing them entirely. Such a cool addition. The puzzles range from simple ones like moving a box out of your way in the beginning, and yes, you can make mistake even there, to moving in a room where everything is invisible, traps, chests, and the solution. This may sound infuriating, but it's not. The puzzle is interesting, has some hints, and demands observation from the player. The castle is not big and you'll quickly learn the layout. Exploration of the room is rewarded not only with an item needed for progressing, but with food for restoring health, coins for buying items from the merchant and saving your game, and candles. The latter is used for an interesting mechanic. The castle is dark, in places pitch black, and the only way to see is to equip a candle. The interesting part I'm talking about is putting them on the ground wherever you want. That way you will have constant light and you can see the roaming monsters from far away. However, you will never have enough to put everywhere in the castle. The placement is up to you, place them smartly. But here's the thing, you can always pick them up. So for example, if you are sure you search every corner of a section in the castle, you can get them from the ground and maybe leave one, because despite you have nothing to explore, you may have to go through there because it's close to the place you need to be. My favorite level has to be the last one. It's disturbing, creepy, depressing, different. Enemies can be quite scary, all have different patterns to attack you and can be easily avoided if you are careful, but there is one which if you see him, better run like hell. If he attacks, you are certainly dead. This can be quite annoying if you forget to save. There are no autosaves. The only way to save is to throw a coin in the fountain with the crow in the center of the castle. There are not enough coins to save too often. You may need them from the merchant. I seriously like the save system. It doesn't allow you to save scum, not against it, and makes you think when is the right time to do it. One thing I should mention about the enemies is the variety. I feel the game will benefit if there are one or two more. In total, there are 4. One you'll see in the beginning only, one at the very last level, one at the second half of the game, and one through the whole game. They are all creepy, but a bit more variety will be appreciated. After the first hour, they stop being so scary and you learn how to avoid their attacks. The introduction of one of the monsters got under my skin. The design is awesome, the atmosphere is creepy as hell. Speaking of atmosphere, the best part of the game is the sound design. I'm not particularly a fan of the music, classic Bach in 8-bit, because the game is at its best when there is no music. Just the environmental sounds, whispers, enemy noises, creaking doors, footsteps, it's awesome! The dev described the graphics as something between 18 and 16-bit. So 12-bit? There isn't such a thing, but I think they're humorous about that. Whatever the case, I like the graphics. Nothing mind-blowing, but even with the chosen style, it manages to get under my skin with the help of the sound design. The monsters have simple but effective design. I never thought gods could be scary. What surprised me was the cutscenes. They are gorgeous, colorful and well animated. Also, the character portraits are great too. I like the game a lot, but there are some issues. Nothing too big, just annoying. I had some problems with the enemies. When they are after you, the only thing you can do to get rid of them is hiding under a table or behind curtains. Fair enough. But sometimes it's more useful to get in a door and wait to go away. It seems logical to me. But no matter how long you stay behind the door, when you get out, the monster is still at the same place you left him. This can get annoying when you try to not take damage. You die relatively easy. You face mostly the masked monster, which with time you learn to avoid easily, but there is one, if it notices you, it's game over. You can see in this case, he doesn't move, I think he's stuck, and I have to take damage just to get where I want to be. The good news is, cases like this are rare. The next issue is hand-holding. Some puzzle solution is spelled for you. It's usually Hans saying something, or you'll find notes from JF, someone who was before you here. It's a bit too much on the nose. To be fair, the majority are not like that, but for a puzzle game to have so much spoiled for you, it's a bit disappointing. So now I want to talk about the story and some gameplay mechanics which I was avoiding until now. This is your spoiler warning. Skip to the time on the screen if you don't want me to hear talking about this stuff. When Hans gets mad at his mother, on my mind was, what a brat. Suddenly she lets him go and I was, what? You live in the middle of the forest and you're letting him go? When I figure out it's a fairy tale, I realize it's fitting. Before Hans sets out on an adventure, his mother gives him a couple of items. They are important in the long term. A cane that belongs to Hans' grandfather, 3 golden coins, the currency of the game, and some cheese. From here you take control. Immediately after that you see the first of 3 NPCs. An old woman with her pig. She was going to the market to sell the pig, but her cane broke. Now you have a dilemma. Give the one you have or not. At first I thought I would get the good ending if I was helpful. I was half right. It's helpful in a different way. In the case of the cane, if you give it away, later you will get a snake ring which shows what is fake. It's helpful in a couple of cases. If not, you can use the canes for 2 shortcuts. After I finished the game, I discovered this. The whole game is full of stuff like this. This is valid even for some puzzles. It doesn't change the outcome of the game, but you may go through the castle in a different way. You may even have a bit harder time or miss an NPC. As an example, I'll show you this room. It's full of chests, but most of them are fake, empty. This is your first encounter with Red Carmelengo. Nope, I'm out. Let's get back on track. You put the snake ring and only 2 chests are not glowing red. They have something inside. Without the ring you have to check every single one. Now, of course, some actions, for example, the way you get the ring, are preferred, but not necessary. This is such a cool thing. The first moments of the game are bright and colorful, kinda optimistic. It might not be so twisted after all. Well, no. The last NPC you meet is a goatherd. He's a bit older than Hans, whimsical, carefree. He's hungry and in my case, I shared with him the cheese. He didn't want the apple. Picky guy. In exchange he gives Hans wine and he got drunk and passed out. And then this happens. This is the coolest moment in the game. I was wondering like Hans, what is going on? Is this dream or reality? From the bright setting, you transition to grim, dark and twisted. Awesome! As I mentioned before, I never thought goats could be scary. After that, you see a blue kobold. Hans follows him into a castle and he explains that the owner, Count Lucanor, is looking for an heir to his fortune. But there is a catch, you have to guess the kobold's name. The letters are scattered around the castle. Hans of course believes all this as the grown man that he is. With time all the characters show up in the garden and you have a chance to talk with them. There is more to some of them. Quickly after entering the castle you meet Julia, a treasure hunter. You befriended her fast and along with the 5-hour campaign she helps you with the puzzles. At first I was skeptical towards her, waiting to betray me, but she turns out is the nicest person in the game. Let's discuss some of the endings. There are 5 ranging from very bad to very good. I was thinking to discuss all of them, but eventually I decided just to cover 2 of the endings and briefly mention the rest. I'm moving directly to them because there isn't much of a story development during the whole game. There is an interaction between Hans and the NPCs, but you just follow the events and draw conclusions in your head, which are important for the endings. There is a moment of the game where you finally meet the Count, but the kobold tricks Hans and he falls deep down into the grimmest place in the castle. After a few puzzles, you climb on a giant plant with thorns, which you planted and pour a bucket of blood to grow. Jack and the Beanstalk, anyone? You are greeted from the Count and other people clapping at your arrival. He even says he is your grandfather and the mysterious JF, which you found almost dead, is your father. Hans says he doesn't trust both of them, so you have a couple of choices. The first is to take the offer of the Count, sit on the throne. This is the bad ending. Until he is alive, Hans has a great life. Every night party, plenty of food, fun and sweets. But it's all a lie. All this is part of a curse. He becomes a prisoner of his fantasies and even forgot his mother. Then the kobold screams of joy. I am finally free, almost en masse, kids are easily tricked. So there is more to the story. The second ending I will talk about is my favorite because it's bittersweet. You are in the same situation in front of the count. If you have the snake ring, the one I talk about where you see what is fake, you put it on and you see that the count is fake. He explodes and you decide to have chat with the kobold. Hundreds of years ago, the Count commanded the kobold to find an heir, so he prepared the challenges in the castle. People tried and failed to pass them. The Count didn't want to go easy on them. He wanted the best of the best, but years went by and no one succeeded. The Count got sick and feared that the kobold would choose someone useless for his heir, so just before he dies, calls a witch and commands her to curse him and the castle. He bound them together for eternity until someone goes to the trials. After all the knights, fortune seekers, soldiers, etc., a poor boy reaches the end. Everything Hans saw was a lie. On the question of what will happen if Hans sits on the throne, the kobold answers that he will be trapped in his mind, but he will be free from the curse. In this ending, they reach an agreement. Hans sits on the throne and releases the kobold from his curse in exchange for giving gold to his mother. And this is what happened. I think it's the best ending considering the inspirations for the game. Also, I like bittersweet endings. The rest are good too, but this one just clicked with me the most. The best ending is getting all this information about the curse, finding the Count's treasure, and Hans goes back to his mother. The good news is you don't need to replay the whole game to see them, if you have the necessary items. There is a small section at the end you need to replay, that's it. My problems with some of the endings is a bit nitpicky. I already mentioned it, I don't particularly like some of the endings. In the best possible, get the information, get the treasure, live happily ever after with your mother. Throughout the game, Hans doesn't show that much wits to justify being that smart to make this decision. You can argue that he's smart because he went through all the challenges and once he got tricked by the kobold, he realized something is wrong. But it doesn't feel that way. Throughout the game, he blindly trusts everyone. As I said, this is a nitpick. Horror games come in all shapes and sizes. This is a bite-sized game. You can finish it in one sitting. It took me 5 hours, but I was making sure I didn't miss anything. I don't like jump scare fests, so anything else is fine in my book. I'm always looking for experience like this one. Indie game, an interesting setting, creepy vibes. This was very positive experience. How many games have grim fairy tale plot? And I like adventure games, puzzles, and I don't mind a bit of gore. And to top it all, they've implemented a couple of ways of solving the puzzles or traversing the castle. If this sounds interesting to you, the game is worth your time. For the next video I'm going to switch gears and take a look at something more action-packed, which it turns out is one of my favorite games of all time.